And we talked about sexual health and culture. They're all very broad topics, and we just wanted to narrow it down, and we will be tackling one topic after another. And for our first topic, which is very personal to the three of us, is the topic of circumcision, or known as FGM, and we know that it's still a practice. It's female genital mutilation. It's still a practice that is still continuing in a lot of societies and in the third world, in our own communities, and we just thought we'd tackle it.
Yeah, oh my goodness, this one is very tough. Again, I know some communities call it female genital cutting, because they're just cutting the clitoris, which I think is what happens in our community. We come from our parents, and I think all of us come from the Kisii community in southwestern Kenya. We all grew up in Nairobi, but we also have spent time in the village. So yeah, Kisii. FGM is a very rampant practice in this community, as is with the Maasai and I think Meru communities in Kenya and other communities, and yeah. And so today we just want to talk about how our experiences with it and the experiences of our loved ones with it. So whoever is comfortable, we can start. It's taken a long time to get here, but I'm happy that we're finally facing the world and facing ourselves and talking about our experiences.
Yeah, it's funny. We when we got together, we've been friends. We've been in the same spaces, but we didn't get around to sharing what this is an experience. So it was a surprise to the three of us to know that we'd all encountered this at some point. I in particular was stolen from my parents when we went to visit my grandmother at 3 a.m. and my parents were sleeping, and we were sleeping with my grandma. My grandma woke me up, and just this tiny thing. I had no idea, and by the time my mom woke up and found out that had happened, the ceremony was complete, and there was not much she could have done about it. And it was as if it's community, so there's really not much to do. There's not much opposition. You can't really call cops on my grandparents, so so things like those happen. People are still doing it, even if it was illegal. It's illegal. The people get arrested for it, so that's why now it's practiced at 3 a.m. in the middle of the night, where no one knows. It was in the middle of somebody's farm somewhere, and with just unsterile. I don't know. It was the whole thing was done very crudely. While it's not female genital mutilation, they cut a section of it. I have no idea why. It's so silly, but it's still that intrusion into the girls. All the girls that were around me, while we were so proud of it because it's a rite of passage, it's also this intrusion into your own space, and you have no say about it. People make decisions for you, and years later is when I realized, this happened without my consent.
My experience with FGM has mostly been with the people close to me. So I had at one time I remember having this conversation with my mom, and while FGM at that point was not a reality to me, but when she sat me down and talked to me about it, it was like, this almost happened to you, and she just happened to realize it before it happened and was able to stop it. But some of my cousins were not fortunate enough to have that. And I think for me the really sad part is that it's mostly our mothers and our grandmothers that make us go through that. Having gone through it and knowing the effects of it, they still perpetuate it. And that is really sad. I remember a time when I was working for Akili Dada, and we went to a certain village among the Maasai community, and we were having this discussion. We had leaders from the community, both men and women, talking about FGM. because in that community it is something that it still goes on, and the community has accepted it even though it's illegal. Yeah. And when we were having this conversation, some of the men talked and they say that, it's something that has been part of our culture, and it's the women who support it. So we really don't have much control over it. And I think that was the sad part, that a mother, having gone through that, would want her daughter to go through it just because it's a rite of passage. And yeah, so for me, I think it's one of those very, very sensitive topics, and even the three of us coming together to talk about it, it takes a lot of courage to talk about it, because a lot of people have gone through it, a lot of people go through it. Some of them are proud of it, others, it just happens to them when they have no idea what's going on. This is your grandma, of course she knows what's best for you, and you just find yourself in that situation. And so I think it's about time we start talking about these things, sensitive as they are to us. It's about time we start talking about it.
Yeah, and yes, this is a very personal topic to me, and like very disturbing. Like I'm a married woman now, so like I'm experiencing the side effects of it, and so that's not funny. But how I came to undergo FGM, so I was born in Nairobi, but after I think 2 years, my mom and my younger sister and I moved to Kisii. I think that's a practice that was common, I think, among families then. Sometimes the man goes to the city or to make money, and the wife and children stay in the village and to cut costs on the father's end or whatever. Leads to a lot of problems, but let's not get into that right now. And so I grew up in the village in my formative years. I speak Kisii thanks to that. But I think when I was 4 or 2, I don't know when exactly, but I was young, and I know I stayed in the village up until I was 9 or 10. Right before I turned 10, we moved back to Nairobi again. And so growing up in the village, I was exposed to all these rites that happened in the village, and just like things that were village things,
Yeah.
And circumcision, or rather female genital cutting, was just one of those things that you were excited about. If you've been in the West, or like I've heard of something of the Hispanic culture, it's like almost feels like a quinceañera, like you're turning 15 and you're being brought out and you have this beautiful dress. So for us, it was like, you're gonna go through this rite, and then you're in seclusion for some time, and you're being treated specially, and then at the end of it all, you'll get a new dress, and you'll come out, and whatever, you become a woman. So for me at that time, I didn't really know about the laws that existed about it. I mean, it was kind of harsh kind of talking about it, but I was still excited about it because everybody around me was doing it. So it happened to us, me and my younger sister. She's like a year and a half younger than me, and then our neighbors she was like my age, and her little sister was my sister's age. So imagine these 4 little girls coming together and kind of excited about this thing. And so luckily they anesthesia, I can never say that word. So anesthesia, they use anesthesia, a local anesthesia, and then they use razor blades.
Yeah.
I didn't feel it, and sadly, it's sad to say that I was proud of having gone through it. It's just when we moved back to Nairobi, because then I think it was like that Christmas that we moved back to Nairobi, and I was still healing, like we were both still healing from the side effects of it. That once I went to class and we're talking about history, geography, and civics, and whatever health education, and they started talking about how FGM was illegal, and here I was, and everybody who lived in Nairobi hadn't gone through the rite, and I was sitting in class like not wanting to voice my opinions about it, like feeling ashamed that I had gone through this rite, like why my parents hadn't saved me from it, like if they knew it was illegal, like why did they let me go through it, And so I feel like I've lived with that shame all through my life. Like in high school, like imagine if it's the same thing, like maybe you're seated in church and the pastor is up front saying, you shouldn't be doing that thing, that you did last night, you shouldn't be drinking and you drank last night, you shouldn't maybe have sex with that man or woman and you did that last night. And it's just like that sense of condemnation, and you can't share it, because sharing it means that you're going to be judged for it or like be pitied for it. And so I know all through my life I've put up a strong facade. and I've never really had a conversation either with my parents or like, well, eventually I did, but for the longest time I did not. And yeah, it hasn't felt good. And briefly we'll talk about the side effects of it and why it's important for us to finally start talking about this to people we're close to who've gone through the same issue, and then to other people who haven't, and even the larger community that's still practicing it. So yeah, for maybe the next video we'll talk about the side effects and like what we're thinking of doing.
Yeah.